Welcome back to Persistent Purpose with MJ Hunter. I am your host, Coach MJ. I am a global speaker, mindset strategist, emerging author, and event producer, podcaster extraordinaire, and serial entrepreneur. I'm so glad you've joined us. If you haven't already, be sure to follow or subscribe to this podcast and turn on your alerts or your notifications so that you don't miss any episodes when they come out, and share this with a friend. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my most favorite topics, which is what we usually refer to as time management. Although I prefer to say not time management because you can't manage time. However, you can manage yourself and how you use your time. You can't manage time because it's going to pass regardless of what you do. It's going to keep moving on whether you use the time wisely or not. So you can't manage time or stop it from doing anything. But you can change the way you relate to time. And despite not being perfect at it, I am really good at managing a very tight and full schedule full of things I love without it being overwhelming or being just daunting. So I'm going to be sharing with you today some of my favorite tools and tactics to keep my schedule under control. And I want you to get out a notepad, whether you struggle with time management. I'm going to call it time management, even though I've already told you it's really about self-management and how you use your time. But everybody knows the phrase time management, so that's what we're going to call it. But whether you are good with time management and you're just looking for a little bit of extra, or if you suck at it, this is the episode for you. So get your notepad and pen out. My first secret for what I call time juggling, right? You feel like you have all these balls in the air and you don't know whether you're going to catch them all or keep them all moving or if they're all going to fall on the floor. The first one is to set standards for your calendar. Now, if you've been watching me for any amount of time, you know I love things that begin with the same letter. So today, all of our secrets begin with the letter S. Set standards for your calendar. What do I mean by that? You have to have a criteria or a filter or some type of guidelines that determine what you do and don't add to your calendar. It can't just be a free for all and just whatever somebody asks you to do, you just say yes, yes, yes. You need to have standards or a filter for when you say yes and when you say no. This is important because the way our lives are right now and the way the world is connected right now, there will never be an end to how many events you can be invited to, opportunities that you can be afforded, places you can go, people you can hang out with, things that you can do in your community and in the world at large. And a lot of them will sound great. You need to have some type of litmus test whereby you say, this is what I should add, and this is what I should say no to. One of my favorite standards that I use is my personal core values. I have 5 of them. And if an event, an opportunity, a meeting, whatever it might be, does not align with at least one of my 5 core values, it's a no. And it doesn't mean it's a bad activity. It doesn't mean that whoever invited me was a bad person. It just means it's not for me. My core values could shift in the near or distant future, at which time my filter, my standard for my calendar will change. But at this point, that's one of my favorite standards is just say, does it align with my values? You also have to have rules for how you will use your calendar and how you will use your time. And one of my favorite standards is that if something can be done in 3 minutes or less, I do it now. Now, that's a literal 3 minutes. Now, if you struggle with time and how long things take, don't get caught up in this one until you master some of the other time management strategies. But if something can be done in 3 minutes or less, I don't leave it on my to-do list to fester and be put off until later and all that. I do it now. So it might be a quick chore at my house. It could be a quick phone call. It could be a quick jaunt out online to look up a piece of information. If I can do it in 3 minutes or less, I do it now. If it takes longer than that, I add it to my calendar. And also another one is I'm going to talk about this one in the next, is to scribble it down now. What do I mean by scribble it down now? Anything that comes up that you want to do or that you want to remember, You need to write it down now. That's one of my standards, which is why I put this one next. It's one of my standards, but it's also just a great guideline in general for managing your time. A lot of times we try to manage inside our heads. Oh, I can remember that. Einstein, one of the most brilliant scientists and brains that has ever lived, at least in our recent history, said never, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but never try to remember something that you can look up, right? So if a piece of information is somewhere where you can look it up, such as on your calendar or at least written down on a notepad or in your phone, then why try to remember it? It's having all those things rattling around in your brain that always gives you this feeling that you're going to miss out on something, that you're going to forget something. And often you do miss out. You do forget. Write it down in the moment. Don't say, I'm going to write it down in 5 minutes. Most of us have a device of some nature nearby or in our hands at all times. If it's not in your hands, it's charging nearby. Put it in there. They give us so many methods within our devices whereby we can write things down. So use your notes. Don't try to remember anything because it can get away from you. Things can slip away. Somebody says something to you, you start focusing on something different, and then you're like, what was that I wanted to remember? And then you have all of that stuff in your brain bugging you. Like, what was it I'm trying to remember? Why do that? We don't get brownie points for remembering all this stuff and not having to write it down. I think some people think it's a badge of honor that I juggle all these things. You're not doing something well. What you're doing is taking away brain power from focusing on what you need to be focusing on, which is pursuing your purpose, the work you need to be doing, focusing on your family, whatever those things are. Scribble it down right now. Don't think you're going to remember it for later. You might remember, you might not. And there's a good chance that you won't. And then a great idea or a great appointment or whatever that is could slip away from you and you can forget it for good. And I mentioned something a moment ago that kind of relates to my next secret, which is put convenient systems in place. I talked about never trying to remember something that you can write down, which is everything. You can write down everything. Use the systems, whether automated or even on paper, to write them down, to put those systems in place so that you don't lose track of the things that you need to be doing with your time. What do I mean by systems? I, for one, am absolutely in love with my digital calendar, which for me is Google Calendar. I love the fact that I can set up alerts. So one of my rules, one of my standards is when I have an appointment, I immediately put it in Google Calendar while I'm there, and I set up an alert that will notify me by email or by a pop-up on my phone when at a certain time that makes sense for me to be reminded I need to do it. But another system I have in place, and it's sitting right here, is my beloved paper planner. I cannot live without my planner. I love my planner. It gives you, I'm turning it upside down. It gives you a month at a glance. It gives you week by week. And I like having my paper planner. For one thing, it's something about writing things down that makes it solidified, that makes it real. I write it down there and then I can look and see at a glance where everything is. No matter how great my Google Calendar is, I don't prefer the month view on the screen to having it on paper. Another thing is I'm always thinking, what if my Google gets hacked? And I lose my calendar, I lose everything. Or what if the cloud gets hacked or whatever? I want to have everything written down. So my calendar exists in two forms. But once you have a system in place, I always have my paper calendar nearby. And I always have my Google Calendar in my phone. I always can write things down so I don't have to try to remember things. If I don't have my paper calendar, I at least make sure that I put it in my digital calendar and I leave myself a reminder, which is another great system that you can use and it's in your phone, is a reminder that reminds you to write it on your paper calendar when you get home. So there's so many ways that we can systematize our time. Again, not trying to remember things. Sometimes if you just write it on a paper calendar, well, the paper calendar is only as good as you're remembering to look at it, which is why I use email reminders and alerts. I'm able to manage this schedule of mine because I'm not trying to remember things. I let the things remember themselves. I keep my calendars handy. I systematize things so that I can stay on point. If it's not in my calendar, It's not real. So if you ever ask me to do something and I don't put it in my calendar, that's because I have no intention of doing it. But if I say yes, of course, I'm going to put it in there. Set up a system that works for you. Maybe you are 100% paper calendar. That's 100% fine. Make sure you choose a system that's convenient and stick to it instead of leaving it up to chance. I hope I can remember, or even asking somebody to remind you. That may make sense if you maybe you have a spouse that's better with their time, and so asking them to remind you of things could help, but making it somebody else's responsibility is not really a best practice. Figure out ways that you can remind yourself about all the things that you want to do. Another one of my time management hacks or secrets or time juggling hacks is to use what I call not so common sense. It's not common sense. If this was common sense, not that many people will be struggling with time juggling. So what do I mean by not so common sense? We tend to overestimate how much we can accomplish in a day, and I'm guilty of this, but we underestimate how much we can accomplish in a year. So most people have these huge, and I'm guilty of this. I am guilty of it. I put all this stuff that I want to do, and I put it on today's calendar, on today's to-do list, not realizing or not accepting the fact that some of those activities I know take an hour, 2 hours, what have you. But I put them on today, and then I end up not being able to check everything off, and it just moves to tomorrow. Be sensible about how much time things take. You may have to do some time studies. I guess that would be, the matter of fact, that needs to be another one. That's going to be a bonus. I didn't have that. Do a study, do a time study, and time yourself with a stopwatch of how long it takes you to complete certain routine tasks. And then you will know how long it takes and how much you can do in a day. We tend to overestimate how much we can do in a day, but then we can underestimate how much we can accomplish in a month or a year or even a week, but definitely a month or a year. So we don't put a lot of thought into what can I accomplish in this month or in this year if I just do 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day or just an hour a week. So be sensible or use your not so common sense to say, this is what I can accomplish in this day. We get overwhelmed and our schedules get packed when we put too much on a day. We say we're going to be here at 10 and here at 12 and here at 2 and here at 4. And yes, technically it could work out if everything is on time and there's no traffic and you're not tired, but that's not realistic. Be realistic and be sensible about what you can accomplish in a day, but then schedule some things out over the course of a month and even a year and recognize just how much you can accomplish when you give yourself more time to do it instead of being so naive, I would say, or delusional about what you can accomplish in a given day. Like I said, I'm great at this time management or self-management thing, but I still am guilty of this because sometimes you get so enthusiastic. I want to get all this stuff done, and you can't get it all done in a day, and you kind of feel like, man, I let myself down. Be sensible. And like I said, the bonus one is doing a time study. I don't have a banner for that one, but I'm going to write that one down because I want to make sure I capture a time study, measuring how long it actually takes you to do things so that when you go to schedule in the future, you can be realistic about your time. And then the last one I'm going to share today is on working with speed. Working with speed, that means a project or a task will take the amount of time you give it. I use this example often. If you know that you have a family member coming to visit you in 3 months, what are you going to do to your house right now? Probably not much. You have 3 months. You got 90 days. You're not going to start working on the cleaning. You might order some equipment. If you have to order an extra bed or something, you might do something like that. But for the most part, you're not going to leap into action. Whereas if you know they're coming in 3 weeks, that's going to maybe put a little bit of the pressure on. You know, you've got to set some things up in your home, in your schedule, maybe do some planning, notifying some individuals that may need to know. You start to feel like, okay, I've got to start taking some action. If you know they're coming in 3 days and you didn't know until just now, you really are going to begin to move with urgency because they'll be here in 72 hours. This place is filthy. I've got to go here. I've got to go there. I've got to go to the store. I've got to call this one. I've got to schedule this. You move with urgency. And then if you find out a family member is coming to visit in 3 hours or in 3 minutes, they'll be here in 3 minutes. You move with a frantic pace. All of it is the same thing that you were notified of, the family member coming to visit, but you move at a different speed when you have less time. A task takes as long as you give it. So if it doesn't take you 90 days, you're not going to work for 90 days to clean your house. But if you need to clean it in 3 days, you can get it done. You can get the same cleaning done that you were going to do in 3 weeks in 3 days if you move at a different pace. Maybe you push some other things off of your plate. I use that example to say that you can move with urgency even when I like to call it artificial urgency. You can decide, I want to complete this task in less time. And so I have 4 hours to do it. Now, you may actually have 2 days to do it. But tell yourself, I have to be done with this 8 o'clock right now. I have to be done with this at 12. I have to be done with this at 12 and move at a speed that will cause you to be done. You can do that. You can work at that speed. Act like the relative is coming sooner than later. Working with speed is a major time juggling hack because you can complete so many more tasks in less time. Now, I'm not talking about being reckless and frantic, like, creating stress on yourself. No, but working at the pace as if you literally have to get this done. You get to decide that. You get to decide what you get done and by what amount of time. And so set that urgency up, that artificial urgency, and work through your schedule. You can actually get the amount of 3 work days done in 1 day if you move with urgency, and you can do that every day. Again, you don't have to outside of you setting your own standard, back to the standards for getting it done early. So those are my time juggling secrets. But guess what? If you are not good at managing your time, that might have been more overwhelming to you, or you might want some more help with instituting some of these secrets into your life. And if that's the case, I've got something great for you. Coming up very soon, I have a masterclass planned just for my people who want to tame your time. It's during lunch and learn time, during the noon hour. I am going to be doing a masterclass on some of the things we were just talking about just now and much more, showing you how to put the systems in place, showing you how to work with speed, showing you how to use sense when you're putting things into your schedule, showing you how to set standards for your calendar. I want you to go to MelanieHunter.com/masterclass and sign up for that class. It's coming up here very soon, and you don't want to miss out on it. Just in 1 hour, you can turn the tables on how you use your time. But it's not going to come by osmosis. It's not going to come by magic, but you need an expert that's going to help guide you and give you those steps. And guess what? I'm doing it complimentary this time. So you don't even have to pay. I'm doing it for free this time. So get in on it. Don't miss out on these time juggling masterclasses. MelanieHunter.com/masterclasses, where you go to get registered. I look forward to seeing you there. And I also look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Persistent Purpose with MJ Hunter. Until next time, take care and be blessed.